Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us here today for what will be an important but yet a long-awaited announcement from our province. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought with it, as we know, over the last 3 months, a number of significant challenges for residents, for our business community, for people involved in various industries, and others in Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, during this time, we have heard exceptional stories of people who've been helping their neighbours, whether it's by calling just to say hello or people that have been delivering food. What has been very clear is that the community has pulled together through this time. And we have shared many stories of some of the unsung heroes that we have in our province. You've heard me talk quite often about the volunteers in Port aux Basques with the Salvation Army who provided meals for truckers along their journey, delivering essential goods. And those employees at Eddie's Restaurant in Southbrook who were offering free baked breakfasts and free turkey dinners to our truckers. These are just a couple of what has been a number of countless stories of how our community has pulled together in the last 3 months. And of course, it makes us proud to be a Newfoundlander and a Labradorian, and I know it makes me especially proud as being Premier of this province. Now, since the onset of the pandemic, we have been working closely with our federal government and other provinces to put supports in place for families, for businesses, and for industry. Now, while we have spent significant time working to keep you safe and making sure everyone understands the importance of adhering to those measures, we have also spent considerable amount of time working extremely hard to protect our economic and social well-being. The work that we have done and continue to do is to help ease the burden during this unprecedented time in the history of Newfoundland and Labrador. Between myself, our ministers, and officials, we have had daily discussions with the federal government and our colleagues to work together to inform and develop programs and supports. All of our work has been about helping you during this global pandemic, with the goal to provide assistance for such things as paying bills, putting food on your table. There has been a considerable focus on how to alleviate the stress that this pandemic has placed on the people and the industries in Newfoundland and Labrador. We have implemented a number of measures to help ease some of the pressures. It's not hard to see the results of this work. You look back to the $25 million investment through tourism and hospitality support program for this industry, and this is complementing what's been already in place by the federal government. We also launched a residential construction rebate program, and that includes a 25% rebate on renovation projects and a $10,000 rebate for new home construction. We also announced additional procurement measures for businesses and to provide greater flexibility and a more efficient procurement process, specifically for local enterprises. And just last week, we announced nearly $10 million to create jobs and develop forestry sector opportunities. We've also invested $17 million in child care services during the COVID-19 pandemic, which included our essential worker child care service program. We knew very early in this, once we closed up child care centers, it was important then we were able to put a program in place to support the essential workers so they can get to work safely during this pandemic. And this program provided some $200 per week for essential workers. And the analysis and research on this will show that this was the most generous program across the country. So from the very beginning, we have been recognizing the amazing work, the dedication, and the resilience of essential workers in our province, They have been providing safety, stability, and comfort at a time which was unordinary in Newfoundland and Labrador. They continue to do this, and while we adjust to this new normal. The residents of Newfoundland and Labrador have done a remarkable job in following the health guidelines. And so by doing so, you have protected not only yourself, but your family and the safety of our essential workers who continue to go above and beyond on a daily basis. So which is why today that we are pleased to announce and provide details on the COVID-19 Essential Worker Support Program. It's a program that's worth $64 million. Of that, 80% of it will be funded by the federal government. So I'm pleased to say that this funding will help approximately some 43,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Through this program, in partnership with the federal government, we will provide a one-time compensation top-up to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. This will be for residents who meet the criteria, who work in jobs that the federal government has identified as essential services and functions. As this pandemic has shown us, the term essential worker does not just apply to first responders or those that work in healthcare. It also applies to those who work in a wide range of industries that people rely on every day. The federal government's guidance document includes a range of professionals in some 10 sectors. Healthcare is one example, as we all know, such as those that provide home support services or those that work in personal care homes. And also for those that work in the energy and utilities, because we require them to make sure that the electricity generation continues. Information communication technologies, and these are the people that make sure that we have good wireless connections in place and that infrastructure remains to function on our behalf. Finance, such as the employees in banks, food service, the employees in a grocery store. We realized early on that they were essential employees. Those that maintain drinking water facilities within our province. Transportation, such as taxi drivers. Safety, a broad range. This is a broad range category, including some 9/11 call center employees, workers who manage the medical waste, and more. So there's a wide range. And our government employees, such as those who maintain our government buildings, employees in manufacturing. So as I said, the definition is very broad, it's very lengthy, and these are just a few examples of who will meet the criteria in today's announcement. So I encourage everyone who thinks that they might qualify to visit the Public Safety Canada website where the guidance document can be found. We will also provide links to our social media platforms as well as a news release today for their reference. So there is a list of eligibility criteria that Minister Osborne will elaborate on with detail. But for those who qualify to receive a one-time payment between $600 and $1,500, which varies by the number of hours you work. So this is the magnitude between $600 and a $1,500 bonus that you will receive. So this program is a diverse range of essential workers and will receive the compensation that recognizes their support in providing critical services during the pandemic. On behalf of the provincial government, I want to say thank you for all your support in supporting the people of our province during this difficult time. You have kept the province running and the residents in good health, and thank you for the commitment to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So to all the residents of the province, I appreciate your remarkable efforts to flatten the curve. Newfoundland and Labrador has weathered many difficult events in our history, and that's why I remain confident that we will emerge through this pandemic as strong as ever. I will now pass it over to Minister Osborne to provide some more details on the eligibility requirements and other technical matters.
Thank you, Premier. As the Premier has indicated, the COVID-19 Essential Worker Support Program will provide one-time payments to qualifying essential workers. In order to qualify for the program, essential workers must fall within a specific amount of hours worked and income thresholds during the 16-week eligibility period between March 15th and July 4th, 2020. The minimum number of hours worked to qualify is 190 hours over the 16-week period, while the maximum income to qualify ranges between $1,000 and $3,000 per month, tied to the number of hours worked. The specific ranges are shown on the screen here and will be included in our media release for reference. The employer application for compensation to be paid to their employees will be available in July after the 16-week eligibility period ends. Employers must complete the application on behalf of qualifying employees, providing proof of the employee's eligibility. We are encouraging all employers to help support their staff through the application process. We are providing an additional 10% to help the employers offset their related costs. We are doing so to ensure that this does not become an impediment to employers for employing on behalf of the employees. It is important to note that recipients of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit are not eligible for compensation through the Essential Worker Program. The federal government is contributing just under 80% of the funding for this program, allowing us to support as many essential workers as possible, despite the fiscal challenges we currently face. We estimate that the cost to the province will be approximately $13.8 million for this program. This is spending that we believe is in the best interest of the province, as we are offsetting the cost to businesses and targeting a broad group of essential workers than was originally set out in the parameters provided by the Government of Canada. I join the Premier and all of our Cabinet colleagues in extending our thanks to all essential workers for their important work during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now open it up for questions from the media.
Thank you, Premier and Minister. For the benefit of yourself, we have 6 journalists on the line. Up first, we have Victoria Badcock with VOCM. Please go ahead.
Hi. How long will it take before essential workers will see money in their bank accounts?
Well, Victoria, the program itself is from a period of mid-March till July 4th. So there will be a portal that will be open for the employers on July 6th, and that portal will remain open until the end of July 31st. So sometime during that period there, the employers, on behalf of their employees, will be able to input the data that's required for the payouts. So you could see this range anywhere from, it really depends on when the employers get their information in, but sometime in July, if it extends into August, depending on when the employers can get that work done.
Okay. And does the fact that you need to top up the pay for essential workers suggest that perhaps they are being paid too little in the first place?
Well, there's always, there's always a debate, and we have this on a regular basis. But this particular program today was designed to respond to the essential workers and the great work that they did in responding to this very difficult time in the history of our province during this pandemic. So the ongoing discussion, I'm sure, or post-COVID will remain, but this program today is one that was working with a kind of cost-shared analysis basis with the federal and the provincial governments. It's been happening right across the country for those provinces that have participated. We've expanded our program. In the beginning, this was meant to top out at $2,500. We've taken ours to $3,000 in recognition. We've had some great essential workers that have stepped up during this pandemic.
And what has the pandemic taught us about the need for certain types of employees to be paid more equally?
Well, I think early on, I think early on in this pandemic, there was a discussion about what would be an essential worker under normal circumstances versus what would be an essential worker over a long period of time. What was an essential worker today would probably not have been, in many cases, in the past, considered to be an essential worker over a short period of time. So I think we've taken the approach that we've broadened, and we've been saying this from the beginning, that we wanted to make sure that we gave a recognized the essential worker during the pandemic was a very different essential worker under normal circumstances. So we're very pleased today. This is a broad list of employees, some 43,000 people in our province will be able to participate in this program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the line, we have Patrick Butler with Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm just curious, why is it that an employer will apply rather than an employee?
Well, if you think back, Patrick, when we put in place the child care program, we had essential workers that we really needed to make sure that they did not have to worry about child care when we were asking them to go to work during a difficult time. And during that process, there was a verification by the employer that they were required, these employees would be essential to their function of business, to do their work of their business. So we've taken a very similar approach here. We would have had to go back to the employers anyway to get verification this individual or these individuals being an essential worker. It would have been very difficult to have a portal where we could actually pay some 43,000 people. That mechanism inside of most provincial governments would not have been there. The easiest thing to do and the most successful thing to do would be go back to the employers to work with them. There would have been thousands of, I just mentioned, employees. In this case, we'll deal with a smaller number. If employers literally, might be some hundreds, a few hundreds employers, maybe 1,000, who knows what the number will be. But it was really just a matter of functionality and making sure that we can do this efficiently. That led to the discussion, well, this will be an impact on the employer, some of the wage costs and some of the administrative things that they would have had to deal with as an employer. So we've taken that into account, and we've been working with the employers for that. That's the reason why you see the 10% difference, and they will be compensated for the payroll burden that they would have incurred.
And what happens to a person, this may not happen, but if their employer doesn't apply, but they feel they're eligible for the benefit. Have you kind of played out that situation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We thought of that. Of course, we were asking employers to do the right thing here, and that's to support the program because it's their employees that have helped them through this pandemic as well. But if we find cases where employers are not able to do this for any number of reasons, yes, on a case-by-case, we'd be able to work with those employees.
And I'm also just curious about the timing. Why now, at this point, so many months into the pandemic, are you announcing this today?
Well, it's a one-time payment, and the program runs until July the 4th. We'll open the portal on July 6th, leave it open until the end of July. So it's a one-time payment. It is a recognition of the work that those employees would have been doing during the pandemic. So since it's, July 4th before it ends, a one-time payment. So right now, getting this information out there allows the employees and the employers to now start preparing for the work that they will be required to do to be the recipients post July 4th.
Thank you, Premier. Next on the line, we have Dave Salter with NTV. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Premier.
Morning.
Just want to ask you, as you said off the start, this is a long-awaited announcement. Take me through some of the logistics that were required to get to this point, because it has been a few weeks, I guess, that people have been waiting for this. Just take me through maybe even some of the challenges of getting this put to bed.
Yeah, so early on, when you think about the history of this, we had a $2,000 per month for employees that were out of work, and this was one of the early announcements that we would have seen early in April by the federal government. Subsequent to that, there was some discussion around, would it be easier for employees just to stay home and not go to work? Well, this was not what those federal programs were designed to be. So at that time, from the federal government's point of view, they moved that up to $2,500, and there was a kind of an incentive, and basically the essential worker program that was being discussed, many weeks ago. This is what it was designed to be, some $2,500 a month. We recognize in our province right now that if you were making more than $15.63, that you would not be able to participate in that program. So we started, and then there was a lot of questions. People were talking about it just for healthcare workers. We were of the view that the essential worker in Newfoundland and Labrador to support our residents were much broader than those involved in the healthcare sectors. So we just wanted to make sure that we captured as many people as we could, realizing there will always be a threshold, there will always be a cutoff. But we've raised the bar from 2,500 to 3,000. We've broadened the scope, the definition of who essential worker would be. That's the reason why it's taken some time. Plus, we needed, to send our program to the federal government to make sure that they would approve, the new criteria that we put in place, and we were able to do that. And I would say to Minister Osborne and his group, they've done a remarkable job in doing a lot of the legwork and a lot of the background work in the design of this program.
Premier, obviously the province is having, some serious fiscal challenges. Why was it important for you to have this program?
Well, it's these workers that have stepped up, and they provided some of the supports to Newfoundland and Labrador, as I said, during some of the toughest time in their history. So it's about $13.8 million, that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador will be used. As Minister Osborne said, 80% of this will come from the federal government. So the cost of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador will be some $13.8 million. But as you put, nearly well over $60 million into the system, there will be some, benefit to the Treasury and so on. So we've been able to, in recognition of that, putting those revenues back into this program as well. So this was clearly a way to demonstrate to the essential workers in Newfoundland and Labrador that we want to provide an incentive to you, a thank you to you for the work that you've done in those 16 weeks.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Dave, or am I
No,
okay to move on? Okay,
that's fine.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Premier. Next on the line, we have Ashley Fitzpatrick with allnewfoundlandlabrador.com. Please go ahead. Do we have Ashley on the line?
Sorry, got myself muted there. Good morning. I just wanted to ask about the federal contribution. I'm wondering if the percentage is the same as with other provinces.
So the design of this program was a little different than what we would have seen in a cost-shared analysis. And the federal government, and we've done quite a bit of work on this in the design of the program. So they've taken, there is a threshold, it becomes very complicated, but it is different in every single province. We in Newfoundland and Labrador will be able to participate at a level that was, I would think was, I would say, generous to Newfoundland and Labrador. So it wasn't the same program in terms of the federal government participation, given the threshold. So there was like of the lower end threshold, there was around 15% of the first 80 out or 85%. So it's a little different than this one-third, or sometimes 50-50. It's a different formula, very complicated. But at 80% support from the federal government, we were able to plow all this money back into the essential worker program. So it's one that I would say that the minister has done some considerable work in designing this to be very unique to Newfoundland and Labrador, and recognizing that there is a threshold of $3,000, but it is a very good program, and I would think that through my own analysis that I've seen across the country, it captures all the people that we wanted to capture, recognizing that if you're over 3,000, you will not be one of the participants in this. But getting down, it reaches down to anyone that would have worked 190 hours, as an example. So even at the part-time level, so it's very comprehensive, maybe not perfect, but it really says thank you to a lot of the essential workers for the last 16 weeks of this pandemic.
Okay. Can you offer any clearer comparison of the level of federal contribution to Newfoundland and Labrador in this program as opposed to, say, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island? Are they similarly in the range of, say, 70 to 80%?
In some cases, it depended on where they were at the point of the full cost, the provincial cost of the program. So the threshold on a percentage basis was determined by the amount of federal government involvement. For us, in the early days, it was a few $1 million, but we were able to actually continue to support the program and recognizing that there would have been revenue that would have been generated by the provincial government, and we wanted to make sure that that went back into support the essential workers. So at an 80% threshold here of a 60 or well over $60 million, it's a generous program from the federal government. But it was one that we wanted to make sure that we were able to capture as many as possible. This information, I think, Ashley, is probably available online. I can check that out for you and get what information I can if you want to have that comparison.
Okay. I just very quickly, I'm wondering if you can shed any light on exactly how you decided on what employees, what types of employment would be covered by this program. Essentially, is there anything Newfoundland and Labrador specific here?
I would, Minister Osborne can expand on that a little bit, but there was some work with the public safety that, there is a very comprehensive list, and then there's a guidance document that accompanies that list. And as I mentioned, it covers everyone from healthcare workers to transportation, even to those that work in the communications end of our sector. But there's a number of industries that have been included here, and I'm sure Minister Osborne could almost list those off sector by sector, but, that's how this was developed.
Would the minister like to respond to that?
Yeah,
I'd be interested in his.
I certainly can. I guess to your previous question, Ashley, the initial program the federal government had offered us, they would have covered about 97% of the program. But, we made the determination that because there was about a $9 million return to the Treasury in terms of income, payroll, and then consumable taxes, that we didn't want to profit from this program when it was designed to benefit essential workers in the province. So we made the decision as a province to put that $9 million back into the program. Part of the reason for the delay in getting approval is we've expanded on the original parameters set out by the federal government to include as many people as we could, and to include the original program capped out at $2,500. The program now goes to $3,000 monthly income before, in order for an employee to qualify. So what we've done is taken the broadest possible range of people who would qualify for the program as listed by, we didn't pick and choose. We essentially went to the Public Safety Canada list of essential services, and anybody who would be considered an essential worker under that list, we've included them in this. So that's the reason. The original program was supposed to be $52.5 million federal funded. The total program was $55 million provincial funded. It's now well over $60 million because we've expanded the program to include a broader number of people and a higher threshold for those who qualify.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Next on the line, we have Mark Quinn with CBC. Please go ahead.
Hello, yes, thank you. My first question is, I just want to clarify something I think you said, but I think I misunderstood it. To qualify, what's the pay? It's $1,000 to $3,000 per which period?
So what we're looking at here is the average monthly salaries that someone would have made over the 16-week period. So it's mid-March until July 4th. So recognizing that some people, would have worked, maybe 20 hours one week, they could have worked 30 hours the next week based on the way schedules are going. As you know, those that work within industries and many people that work in the healthcare sector, they don't necessarily work the same number of hours every week. So we wanted to make sure that we took the average. And so you can average in some cases, $1,000 a month, and if if your average was higher than that, well, there's a program here that you can actually fit in one of those criteria. But it was really about finding the hours of work over and the amount of money that they would have made, those thresholds over the 16-week period. And by the way, one of the criteria is involved in this too, is that the employees would have had to work during alert level 5 and alert level 4. As we're now in alert level 3. So it was to capture those that, stepped up in the early days of this pandemic as well.
Okay. So it's just so I'm entirely clear. So it's people who made between $1,000 and $3,000 per month who worked in that 16-month period.
16-week period.
Correct?
16-week period, yes.
Week period, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. My other question is, at a time when a lot of grocery stores, I think Loblaws has announced it's making record profits, you're announcing, what some are construing as a subsidy for these companies that are already making record profits during the pandemic. Shouldn't they be paying these employees rather than governments?
This is government's recognition for the essential workers, and many companies were not in a position to step up. So this is really a recognition for the essential workers here. What the relationship between the employer and the employee. It's a different discussion, but this one today is a recognition of the essential workers. Many of them could have been someone that worked in grocery stores. It could have been someone, that were providing cleaning services. It could have been someone that was providing home support services. This is a recognition for those workers who were essential, that we get them in the workplace during this pandemic.
Thank you. And do I have a follow-up?
I think you did, yes.
Okay, thank you. Unions have said that really what the pandemic has done is exposed who's been essential all along. Should there be steps? Is the government going to take steps to recognize a lot of these people are essential and increase the minimum wage?
So right now, that's, as we said, as I just mentioned before, it's a different discussion that occurs on a regular basis as we review minimum wage. It's a different discussion than the one we're having now about the essential worker during this pandemic. This pandemic has taught us many things, and I think there's when you look at the debriefs and all the work that will be done in analyzing how, as Canadians, as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, as we responded to this pandemic, I'm sure all those discussions will continue to occur. But yet, from a minimum wage point of view, on an ongoing basis, back in normal times, there is a process for this. This program here today is in recognition and to really say thank you, compliment those that have stepped up when, it was very difficult. If you remember back in late March in our province, when we were seeing spikes, we were seeing positive cases on every single day. We'd sat at this table and we announced, more positive cases. It was very difficult and very stressful on those people that were asked to go to work in those times. They did it, and this is a way of recognizing and saying thank you to the work that they did during Alert Level 5, 4, and even continuing today in some cases.
Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Next on the line, we have David Mara with Telegram. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, is July 4th kind of the hard cutoff for this date, or is this kind of the first wave of this program that we'll continue to see as the pandemic continues?
Well, the program that we're announcing today is a July 4th program. When we move into, as for the future of this, COVID-19, where this will be in the fall or in the second wave, if indeed we find ourselves in that situation, well, the analysis will then have to be done. What this is a recognition for the work that's been done in the early days of this pandemic on behalf of Newfoundland and Labrador. As I said, it's just a way of saying thank you for the work that they've done.
Okay, so just to be clear, there's no contemplation for the next phase, and if so, we would have to return to an alert level 4 or 5, for example, for any such future support.
No, exactly, David. This program will finish on July 4th, and then employers then will be able to participate in a portal that will be open up on July 6th and will extend into until July the 31st.
Okay, thank you. And slightly adjacent question here, but we know that there's workers in this province who are still waiting for compensation as a result of lost hours from the January snow event, which is about 6 months, almost to the day, since that happened. This money clearly is flowing a whole lot quicker than that money should have flowed. Should workers who lost hours during Snowmageddon just forget about that compensation at this point?
Well, what based on the Snowmageddon, there were some EI issues, and we worked with the federal government. I know the minister did a lot of reach out. There was a lot of discussion and trying to find a federal program and a provincial program to support, some of those people. The federal government at that particular point in time did not see any area where the EI program could support an area for one region of the province, during Snowmageddon. So there was no federal programs that could apply. This one here was one design. It was a national design, yet there was flexibility, like the minister has been able to put forward with his federal colleagues, to provide some flexibility in making it a little unique, but not to one region, but indeed to all of our province.
Okay. Forgive me for 3.5 questions, but just to be clear, is the province still seeking that support for the January snow event?
That work and those discussions continues. If we see an opportunity under the EI program to go back, to be retroactive back into that period of time, of course we are. Right now, this program is just focused on the pandemic time.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, David. We have time for an additional round of single questions each. I'll run through the list, and we'll start with Victoria Babcock with the OCM. Do you have anything further, Victoria?
Nope, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Next on the line, Patrick Butler. Do you have anything further, Patrick?
Yeah, just a question related to what we mean by maximum gross monthly income. Is that take-home pay, and also is the benefit, will that be taxable as well?
The benefit will be taxable. That was one of the reasons why, as the minister just said, that we were able to recognize that this would create some revenue for the province. We want to make sure that this was not a program where the provincial government would see a benefit to itself. So we wanted to make sure that the revenues from taxation, as you just mentioned, was put back to support essential workers.
Sorry, in the first part about is maximum gross monthly income, is that take-home pay or is that for taxes?
Yeah, I think it's net income.
No, gross.
Thank you, Premier. Next on the line, we have David Salter with NTV. Do you have anything further, David?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. And over to Ashley Fitzpatrick with allnewfoundlandlabrador.com. Do you have another question, Ashley?
Yes, I do. Just a quick follow-up on, it mentions that if a case where your employer hasn't applied, essentially it's directing people to circle back to their employers and to ask them to make that application. Is there any alternative available to people if the employers simply aren't doing that or refuse to do that? Is there any sort of avenue that people can take?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I mean, in a rare case, we hope that if there's an employer that is not in a position to open the portal or access the portal to support the employees, well, then there will be provision to be able to work with those employees on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Premier. Next on the line, we have Mark Quinn with CBC for another question.
Yes, I just wanted to elaborate on the last question. For example, I think some of the employees who are eligible may be sort of freelance workers who don't have a single employee. Is there an opportunity for them to apply without going through an employee?
Yes, so self-employed people, this is one of the things that we needed to consider, that, you know, there will be people that will be self-employed, and there's provision to be able to work with them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. And finally on the line, we have David Marr with the Telegram. Go ahead.
I think I'm good. Thank you so much once again.
Oh, thank you, David. Folks, that is the time we have for questions today. If you have anything further, please feel free to email them to myself or Mark Budgell. Thank you for participating in today's availability. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.